Picture this scenario. It's late. You've just finished a big, satisfying dinner, and you feel completely full. Yet some unknown, almost primal force is pulling you towards the kitchen cupboard, right to that secret spot where your favorite chocolate bar or package of cookies is waiting. Sound familiar? You are definitely not alone. Millions of people wage this unequal battle every single day against their sweet tooth. Most of them are convinced it all boils down to a lack of willpower. But what if I told you that this is a massive misconception? What if your sugar craving isn't a simple indulgence but a coded message from your body? In this video, we're going to become health detectives and decode exactly what your body is signaling when it demands sugar. And I promise you, some of the revelations will genuinely shock you. Are you ready to uncover a truth that perhaps even your doctor hasn't told you? Then settle in, get comfortable, and let's dive in. To truly understand the root of this problem, let's take a quick trip back in time. For nearly the entire span of human history, sugar was an absolute rarity. For our ancestors, the sweet taste was the ultimate marker of safe, high-energy food. A sweet fruit signaled ripeness, which meant maximum vitamins and quick fuel, essential for survival, whether they were hunting or fleeing a predator. Our brains are literally hardwired to love sweet things because, evolutionarily speaking, it guaranteed survival. But then everything changed. Enter the Industrial Revolution. By the 19th century, sugar became mass-produced and dirt cheap. It went from a rare delicacy to an everyday ingredient that manufacturers began adding to absolutely everything, the goal being to hook us on their products. Our ancient biology, which was designed for sugar scarcity, suddenly collided with a massive, total surplus. The system crashed. We still instinctively crave sweets, just as our ancestors craved that ripe apple. But now, instead of that apple, we're getting refined sugar in concentrations nature never, ever intended. This conflict between our ancient genetics and the modern food industry is the fundamental root of that uncontrolled craving we are about to dissect today. So, let's start with one of the most underrated, yet critically important, players in our sugar story: chromium. You might know it as a metal, but inside our bodies, this trace element acts as the true conductor in the orchestra of carbohydrate metabolism. Imagine your body's cell as a small house that needs energy. Glucose, the sugar from your food, is the firewood for the stove, and the hormone insulin is the key holder, whose job it is to open the door and bring the wood inside. Now, in this analogy, chromium is the lubricant for that lock. Without enough chromium, our insulin key holder finds it incredibly difficult to open the door. The lock simply jams. As a result, the glucose firewood stays outside, in the bloodstream, while the cell house starves and is cold, sending a signal to the brain. Hey, I'm low on energy. Send more wood. The brain receives this signal and interprets it in the only way it knows how. You urgently need to eat something sweet for quick energy, and you reach for that candy again. This creates a vicious cycle. You eat sweets, your blood glucose level spikes, but it can't enter the cells because of the broken lock. The cells are starving, and your craving for sweets grows even stronger. This mechanism is known as reduced glucose tolerance, and is a precursor to very serious conditions, such as type 2 diabetes. Chromium deficiency is, unfortunately, very common. Modern food processing methods, especially the production of white flour and refined sugar, literally wash away the chromium from our food. What's more, the very act of consuming large amounts of sugar further depletes your body's existing chromium stores. It's a double whammy. So, how can you tell if you might be low on chromium? Besides, the uncontrollable sweet tooth, especially for baked goods and confectionery, you might experience symptoms like rapid fatigue, anxiety, sharp mood swings, and even deteriorating vision. Visually, you can picture an infographic showing a healthy cell, where insulin, assisted by chromium, easily guides glucose inside, and a chromium-deficient cell, where glucose has built up outside, and the cell itself is sending a hunger signal to the brain. Let's talk about the real superhero of the mineral world, magnesium. It's often called the calmness mineral, and for good reason. But its role in tackling sugar cravings goes much deeper than just soothing the nervous system. Magnesium is involved in over 300 biochemical reactions in the body, many of which are directly linked to energy metabolism and blood sugar regulation. First, like chromium, magnesium acts as a cofactor for insulin. It essentially helps our body's key work more efficiently. Research confirms that optimal magnesium levels increase insulin sensitivity. This is key. It means your body needs less insulin to process the same amount of glucose, preventing the sharp blood sugar peaks and crashes that trigger intense sugar cravings. Secondly, magnesium is the undisputed king of energy production. It is absolutely essential for synthesizing ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, the main energy currency of every single one of our cells. When you're deficient in magnesium, energy production slows down. You feel sluggish, fatigued, and completely drained. And what does your body do when it needs a quick fix? It demands the fastest, simplest source of fuel: sugar. That intense pull toward a chocolate bar might actually be your body screaming for the magnesium it needs to power normal cellular energy. Thirdly, let's revisit its famous role as the calmness mineral. Magnesium helps regulate the nervous system by lowering the stress hormone cortisol and boosting GABA, a gamma-aminobutyric acid, our primary inhibitory neurotransmitter responsible for deep relaxation and peace. A lack of magnesium makes us more irritable, anxious, and vulnerable to stress. And stress, as we'll discuss later, is a major trigger for turning to sweets for comfort. This is especially evident for women during PMS, when magnesium levels naturally dip. That intense premenstrual need for a chocolate bar is often a classic sign of magnesium deficiency, because cocoa beans are one of nature's richest sources. Your body is intuitively trying to find what it needs. To visualize this, imagine an animation: a tired, drained cell. A magnesium ion appears beside it, and the cell instantly lights up, flooding with ATP energy. At that moment, the signal for sugar hunger in the brain simply disappears. Let's continue down our list of essential micronutrients. Next up, zinc. While its role is often connected to immunity and skin health, its impact on our food cravings is massive and frequently overlooked. One of the most fascinating functions of zinc is its direct involvement in the operation of our taste and smell receptors. Simply put, zinc determines how vividly and completely we experience the flavor and aroma of food. Imagine your taste receptors as tiny antennas, picking up signals from food and relaying them to the brain. Zinc is a key component of the protein gustin, which is essential for the growth and proper function of these antennas. When a zinc deficiency develops, these antennas start to malfunction. Tastes become dull and muted. Food seems bland and uninteresting. In this situation, the brain begins to demand stronger stimuli just to feel anything at all. And what are the most powerful and intense taste stimulators in our diet? Of course, sugar and salt. Someone with a zinc deficiency unconsciously starts adding more sugar to their coffee or tea, choosing extra sweet desserts, or reaching for sugary sodas. Why? Because only that kind of extreme sweetness can actually break through the weakened receptors and deliver some measure of pleasure to the brain. It's exactly like a person with poor hearing asking to turn the music up louder. Beyond this, zinc, much like chromium and magnesium, plays a critical role in carbohydrate metabolism. It is essential for the pancreas to produce, store, and release insulin. A lack of zinc can disrupt this delicate process, leading to unstable blood sugar levels and, consequently, an intensified craving for fast carbohydrates. Zinc deficiency can arise from various reasons. An unbalanced diet, especially vegetarian diets without proper correction, digestive issues that hinder its absorption, or chronic stress. Symptoms, beyond the cravings for sweet and salty foods, can include frequent colds, slow wound healing, hair loss, and those telltale white spots on your nails. For a visual, you could use a fun animation, a tongue with bright, active taste buds happily reacting to normal food. Then, a low zinc icon appears. The taste buds turn gray and sluggish, and only a massive slice of cake makes them weakly twitch. When our energy levels crash, we often reach for something sweet, for a fast pick-me-up. But what we're actually looking for isn't sugar. It's energy. The production of this energy in our body is managed by an entire team of hard-working champions, the B vitamins. This isn't just one vitamin, but a complex including B1, B2, B3, B5, B6, B9, and B12. Each one plays an indispensable role in converting the food we eat, proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, into that critical ATP energy we've been talking about. Imagine a conveyor belt in a factory where raw materials, food, are transformed into the final product, energy. B vitamins are the workers on this belt. If even one worker is missing, the entire process slows down or grinds to a halt. For example, vitamin B1, thiamine, is critically important specifically for carbohydrate metabolism. Without it, your cells can't effectively use glucose to produce energy. Vitamins B2, riboflavin, and B3, niacin, are key players in the electron transport chain, the final stage of ATP production. Vitamin B5, pantothenic acid, is essential for breaking down both fats and carbohydrates. Vitamin B6, pyridoxine, is involved in protein metabolism and the creation of neurotransmitters, including serotonin, our feel-good hormone. When you run low on B vitamins, this entire energy process begins to break down. You start to feel chronic fatigue, apathy, weakness, and that familiar brain fog. Your body is desperately calling for energy, but it can't produce it efficiently from the normal food you're eating. And that's when it sends a signal to your brain demanding the most primitive and fastest fuel, sugar. It's like trying to start a car with a dead battery by pouring in the highest octane gasoline. It's pointless. The fuel isn't the problem. What's more, sugar itself is a thief of B vitamins. To process it, the body uses up a huge amount of these vitamins, especially thiamine. This creates a vicious cycle. You crave sweets because you lack energy due to a B vitamin deficiency, and the sugar you just ate further depletes their reserves, escalating your fatigue and sweet cravings down the line. Visually, imagine that factory. With enough B vitamin workers, the conveyor runs fast, and you get plenty of energy, coins. When they're deficient, the workers are sluggish, the belt stops, and there's almost nothing produced. We tend to think that cutting carbs is the only way to beat sugar cravings, but often the real problem lies elsewhere. A lack of protein. Protein is the fundamental building block for our body, but its role in appetite control and blood sugar management is often underestimated. Let's break down exactly how it works. First, protein is the most satiating of all macronutrients. It digests slowly, giving you a sustained feeling of fullness. When you choose eggs or cottage cheese for breakfast, instead of a sweet pastry, you stay satisfied for much longer. This is because protein stimulates the production of key satiety hormones, like peptide YI and GLP-1, which signal to your brain, "I'm full, stop eating." Second, including protein with every meal helps stabilize your blood sugar levels. When you eat carbohydrates, especially simple ones, they are quickly absorbed. This causes a rapid spike in glucose, followed by a large release of insulin. Insulin then works just as quickly to clear that sugar from your blood, leading to a sharp drop, or hypoglycemia. This blood sugar crash is the critical moment. When your sugar levels drop below normal, your brain panics, demanding an immediate glucose fix, which is what triggers those intense, irresistible sugar cravings. Protein, however, slows down the absorption of those carbohydrates from your gut. For instance, if you eat an apple with a handful of nuts, instead of just the apple alone, the glucose enters your bloodstream smoothly and gradually. You avoid the dramatic peak and the subsequent crash. Your sugar levels remain stable, and those fierce sugar hunger attacks never start. Third, the amino acids that make up protein are the crucial building blocks for our neurotransmitters, the brain chemicals that govern our mood and motivation. For example, the amino acid tryptophan is necessary for synthesizing serotonin, often called the happiness hormone, and tyrosine is needed for dopamine, the pleasure and motivation hormone. If your diet lacks sufficient protein, the production of these essential neurotransmitters can slow down. Your brain then tries to compensate the easiest way it knows how, by stimulating their release with a quick hit of sugar. To illustrate this, imagine two blood sugar graphs. One, after eating a sweet pastry, a sharp, immediate peak, followed by a deep crash. The second, after eating an omelet with vegetables, a smooth, stable curve with no dramatic swings. For decades, in our collective fight against fat, we completely lost sight of one crucial fact. Not all fats are created equal, and healthy fats, particularly omega-3s, are absolutely essential for both optimal brain health and appetite control. Your brain is made up of more than 60% fat. To function normally, it requires a constant supply of quality building blocks. The cellular membranes of your neurons and the sheaths protecting your nerve fibers, all of it is constructed from fat. When your diet lacks these healthy fats, your brain function suffers. Nerve impulse transmission slows down, concentration plummets, and your memory suffers. But what does all of this have to do with sugar cravings? The brain is by far the most energy-intensive organ in your body. Even at rest, it consumes about 20% of your total energy. Its preferred fuel source is glucose. However, when your brain is healthy and its cell membranes are elastic and permeable, a job handled perfectly by healthy fats, it can efficiently utilize that glucose. But when you have an omega-3 deficiency coupled with an excess of harmful trans fats, those delicate brain cell membranes become stiff and rigid. The insulin receptors on the surface of these cells struggle to do their job, leading to what is essentially brain insulin resistance. As a result, glucose has a much harder time penetrating the neurons. The brain starts to experience energy starvation, even when you have plenty of glucose circulating in your blood. Naturally, it sends a powerful signal. I need the fastest, simplest fuel source possible. Give me sugar. On top of that, healthy fats, just like protein, promote long-lasting satiety. They slow down gastric emptying, meaning food stays in your stomach longer, helping you feel full and satisfied for hours. Healthy fats also help stabilize your blood sugar levels, preventing those sharp, unwanted spikes. A healthy fat deficiency can show up as more than just a sugar craving. Look for dry skin, brittle nails, concentration issues, and frequent mood swings. To visualize this, imagine two brain cells. One is perfectly elastic, with a fluid-permeable membrane that easily allows glucose to flow in. The second cell is rigid, calcified, with glucose molecules literally bouncing off its surface, even as the cell is sending distress signals that it's starving. One of the simplest, yet most frequent causes of a sudden sweet craving is something surprisingly basic: dehydration. Yep, you heard that right. Sometimes your body isn't actually asking for a cookie. It's asking for a glass of plain water. How can that be? It turns out the symptoms of mild dehydration and hunger are incredibly similar, and our brain often confuses the two. That's because the same part of the brain, the hypothalamus, is responsible for regulating both thirst and hunger. When your body lacks water, the hypothalamus can send a mixed signal that we mistakenly interpret as a desire to eat something. What's more, dehydration makes it harder for the body to utilize glycogen, the form of glucose stored in your liver and muscles, which acts as our energy reserve. Water is absolutely essential for breaking down that glycogen and releasing the glucose into the bloodstream. If you don't have enough water, this process slows down. The body can't access its internal stores of quick energy, so it starts demanding it from an external source, food, and naturally, it asks for the fastest source: sugar. You feel a sudden fatigue, weakness, and a strong urge for something sweet, when in reality, all you really need is to top up your fluid levels. There's another interesting mechanism involving the liver. The liver doesn't just store glycogen. It's also responsible for detoxification. Dehydration makes its job much harder. To cope with the extra load, it can send signals to the brain indicating a need for quick energy. What's worse, the sugary drinks many people reach for to quench their thirst only make the situation worse. Sugar has a diuretic effect. It pulls water out of your cells, leading to even greater dehydration and creating a vicious cycle of thirst and sweet cravings. So, how do you distinguish true hunger from thirst in disguise? There's a simple rule. If you feel a sudden pang of hunger or a strong sweet craving, especially between meals, try drinking a large glass of plain water first. Wait 10 to 15 minutes. Very often that's enough for the hunger to completely disappear. It's a simple, yet incredibly effective trick. For a visual example, you could show a quick comic strip. A person feels an energy slump and imagines a slice of cake. Then they drink a glass of water. An energy light bulb turns on above their head, and the thought of the cake vanishes. We've mentioned this term a few times, but now let's take a deep dive. Insulin resistance is arguably the central issue in modern metabolic health, and a primary driver behind those intense, uncontrollable, sweet cravings. It's a condition where your body cells stop responding properly to the hormone insulin. Remember our analogy. Insulin is the keymaster that unlocks the cell's door for glucose. With insulin resistance, that lock on the cell door essentially gets rusty. The keymaster, insulin, arrives, tries to turn the key, but the door only opens with difficulty, or sometimes not at all. So what happens next? Your pancreas sees that your blood sugar level remains high and mistakenly thinks it hasn't produced enough insulin. It kicks into overdrive, dumping more and more of these keymasters into your bloodstream. The result? You have a massive amount of both glucose and insulin circulating in your blood at the same time. This high insulin level, known as hyperinsulinemia, triggers a cascade of issues. Firstly, despite the excess glucose in your blood, your body's cells are actually starving. They can't get the energy they need, so they send intense hunger signals to your brain, demanding more food, especially those quick-fix carbohydrates. Secondly, high insulin acts as a barrier, effectively blocking fat breakdown. Your body switches into pure storage mode. Even if you don't eat much, any excess glucose that the insulin does manage to cram into your cells is immediately converted into fat, particularly around your midsection. That's the dreaded visceral fat. Thirdly, after the pancreas releases that huge shot of insulin, it eventually manages to force the glucose into the cells, and your blood sugar level plummets. This is hypoglycemia, or a sugar crash. You feel weakness, trembling, dizziness, irritability, and that absolute, animalistic craving for something sweet. Your brain is screaming, energy crisis. You eat something sweet. Your sugar spikes again. The pancreas dumps even more insulin, and the entire sugar roller coaster cycle starts all over. It's a vicious circle that exhausts your pancreas and puts you on the direct path to type 2 diabetes. Visually, you can imagine it as a seesaw. On one side is your blood sugar. On the other, insulin. They swing higher and higher, faster and faster, while in the middle sits an exhausted person, being thrown back and forth from a high to a crash. While insulin is the hormone responsible for energy storage, we have other hormones that specifically regulate our appetite. A key player among these is leptin, often called the satiety hormone. Leptin is produced by our fat cells. The more fat tissue we have, the more leptin is produced. Its job is to travel through the bloodstream right up to the brain, specifically the hypothalamus, and send a message. That message is essentially, we have plenty of energy stored up. It's time to stop eating and start burning. In a healthy body, this system works like clockwork. You eat a meal, leptin levels rise. Your brain gets the signal that you are full, and your appetite naturally decreases. But what happens when we consistently overeat, especially with a diet high in sugar and fructose, leading to excess weight? Our fat cells start producing an excessive amount of leptin. Logically, this should completely suppress your appetite. Instead, the opposite occurs. The brain, constantly bombarded by these high doses of leptin, essentially becomes desensitized or burnt out. It becomes insensitive. It goes deaf to the signal. This condition is known as leptin resistance. The brain simply stops hearing those crucial satiety signals. It's like having someone constantly shouting at you. Eventually you just tune it out. The result is counterintuitive. Even though vast amounts of the satiety hormone are circulating in the blood, and the body has more than enough energy reserves, the brain interprets this silence as starvation. It never gets the stop signal. So, the brain continues to send out powerful hunger signals, constantly demanding more food. Crucially, it specifically demands high-calorie, sweet, and fatty foods. Why? Because from the brain's perspective, a famine is occurring, and it needs to urgently store energy for survival. Someone with leptin resistance can eat a full meal. Yet the feeling of fullness either never arrives or is incredibly weak and fades rapidly. They feel constantly hungry, often experiencing intense cravings for snacks, and struggle to control their portion sizes. This creates a devastating vicious cycle. Excess body fat triggers leptin resistance, and leptin resistance in turn drives us to eat more and accumulate even more fat. To visualize this, imagine an animation. Leptin is the postman carrying a letter to the brain that says, "We're full." But the door to the brain is locked with a sign that reads, "Do not disturb." The postman knocks and knocks, but no one answers. If we have a satiety hormone, it stands to reason there must be an antagonist, a hunger hormone, and there is. Say hello to ghrelin. This hormone is primarily produced in your stomach when it's empty. Ghrelin travels to the brain and signals, "Stomach empty, time to find food." Ghrelin levels peak right before a meal, but after you eat, they drop, making way for those satiety hormones. Normally this system works seamlessly. However, modern life and diet can seriously disrupt this delicate balance. First, the composition of your food affects ghrelin production. Research shows that protein-rich foods suppress ghrelin most effectively and for the longest time. Fats also do a decent job of keeping it in check. But carbohydrates, especially simple sugars and fructose, suppress ghrelin only very weakly and temporarily. You eat a sweet roll, your ghrelin dips a little, but just an hour or two later, it's spiking again, and you're hungry all over. Second, sleep has a massive impact on ghrelin. We'll cover this in depth later, but for now, lack of sleep leads to a significant rise in ghrelin levels. Simply put, a sleep-deprived person is a hungry person. Third, and perhaps most interesting for our discussion, ghrelin doesn't just make you feel hungry. It specifically activates the brain's reward centers, the same pathways that respond to drugs and other pleasures. Crucially, it boosts the appeal of high-calorie, sweet, and fatty foods. This means that under ghrelin's influence, plain chicken breast and broccoli will look far less appetizing, while a slice of pizza or a chocolate cake becomes incredibly desirable. Ghrelin is essentially telling your brain, don't just find food. Find the highest calorie, tastiest food you can get your hands on. This mechanism was extremely useful for our ancestors when food was scarce. But in our modern world of abundance, it works against us, compelling us to overeat, particularly the unhealthiest items. You can picture ghrelin as a little devil tempting you, whispering in the hungry person's ear and flashing images of decadent desserts and fast food, while the healthy options look dull and unappealing. Now, let's shift our focus from the hormones that directly regulate hunger and satiety to the hormone that governs our threat response, cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Cortisol is produced by the adrenal glands in response to any stressful situation, whether it's a real danger, like a tiger running towards you, or an imagined one, such as the anxiety of an upcoming exam. Its job is to mobilize all of the body's resources for fight or flight. It does this by raising your blood sugar to supply your muscles and brain with fast energy. In the short term, this is a vital, life-saving mechanism. The problem, however, arises when stress becomes chronic. We might not be running from tigers anymore, but we're constantly worrying about work, finances, and relationships. Our bodies are stuck in a permanent state of high alert, and our cortisol levels remain consistently elevated. Here's what happens next. First, perpetually high cortisol keeps blood sugar high. In turn, the pancreas is forced to constantly produce insulin. This is a direct route to insulin resistance, which we've already discussed, leading to the familiar consequences of the sugar roller coaster and that constant craving for sweets. Second, after a stressful situation, even an imagined one, the body believes it has expended a lot of energy on fight or flight and needs to urgently restock its fuel. Cortisol directly stimulates the appetite, and much like ghrelin, it makes us crave calorie-dense, fatty, and sugary comfort foods. This is what we call emotional eating, or stress eating. For the brain, sugar is not just quick energy. It's a source of pleasure, a fast way to boost mood and calm down. Third, chronically high cortisol promotes fat storage, specifically the most dangerous kind, visceral fat, which accumulates around the abdomen. This fat, in turn, is a metabolically active organ itself, producing inflammatory substances that further worsen insulin resistance. The result is another vicious cycle. Stress leads to high cortisol, which drives sugar cravings, leading to weight gain, and ultimately, even more stress and inflammation. A perfect illustration of this is the infographic that shows how a stressful thought in your head triggers the chain. The adrenals release cortisol, which raises blood sugar, and this immediately leads to the urge to eat that slice of cake. If cortisol is the stress hormone, then serotonin is its polar opposite, our key happiness hormone, essential for good mood and overall well-being. Serotonin is a crucial neurotransmitter that regulates many brain processes, including mood, sleep, appetite, and social behavior. When our serotonin levels are balanced, we feel calm, confident, and genuinely satisfied. We're simply doing well. But when those levels drop, we can experience feelings of sadness, anxiety, irritability, apathy, and even clinical depression. And this is where sugar enters the picture. Consuming simple carbohydrates, the sweets we crave, is the fastest and easiest way to temporarily boost serotonin levels in the brain. How exactly does this work? When we consume carbs, our pancreas releases insulin. Insulin doesn't just help glucose enter our cells, it also essentially clears the way for the amino acid tryptophan. Tryptophan is the precursor that our brain uses to synthesize serotonin. Think of it this way. Insulin tells the other amino acids, "Hey guys, head on over to the muscles." But it gives tryptophan a green light straight to the brain. As a result, after you've had that piece of chocolate, tryptophan concentration spikes in the brain, leading to a temporary increase in serotonin and a short-lived mood boost. We feel relief, a sense of calm and pleasure. Essentially, we are using sweets as a self-medicating antidepressant. Our brain quickly memorizes this connection. I feel awful. I ate something sweet. I feel better. The next time we experience sadness, loneliness, or anxiety, our brain immediately prompts us to reach for that quick sugar fix. The core problem, however, is that this entire effect is extremely brief. Inevitably, the mood boost is followed by a crash, one that is often deeper than the low mood you started with. This is the well-known sugar roller coaster effect. Moreover, constantly forcing serotonin production with sugar can actually deplete your tryptophan reserves and throw off the natural regulation of this vital neurotransmitter, leaving us even more dependent on that sweet fix. It's important to note that low serotonin levels are often connected not just to psychological issues, but also to the state of your gut, as nearly 95% of the body's entire serotonin supply is produced right there. Issues with your gut microbiome can directly influence your mood and consequently your sugar cravings. You can visualize this on a scale. One side holds low serotonin and a sad face. A piece of candy drops onto the other side, and the serotonin scale briefly shoots up, but then immediately plummets even lower than before. While serotonin is all about calm contentment, dopamine drives anticipation, motivation, desire, and the satisfaction of reaching a goal. It's the primary neurotransmitter in our brain's reward system. Dopamine is literally what pushes us to get off the couch and take action. It's released whenever we anticipate a reward, whether that's a delicious meal, praise, winning the lottery, or even a simple social media like. Sugar is one of the most potent dopamine releasers, comparable in power to certain addictive drugs. When we indulge in something sweet, our brain experiences a massive dopamine spike, a true dopamine explosion. We get that rush of euphoria, that high. The brain instantly registers this feeling and the source that triggered it. It forges a powerful neural pathway. Sugar equals incredible pleasure. And the next time around, it will fiercely demand a repeat of that experience. The challenge with this sugar-induced dopamine rush is that the brain quickly adapts. Just as with drug use, tolerance develops. Your dopamine receptors become less sensitive. Now, to get the same level of satisfaction you felt initially, you need a bigger and bigger dose of sugar. One piece of candy won't cut it anymore. You need an entire chocolate bar, and eventually even that stops being enough. This is the exact mechanism that forms a genuine sugar addiction, one strikingly similar to drug dependence. When we try to cut out sugar, we go through true withdrawal symptoms, or what we often call sugar withdrawal. Dopamine levels crash. We feel apathetic, irritable, and struggle to find pleasure in everyday activities, a condition known as an anhedonia. Our brain desperately screams for its next fix. Furthermore, the reward system is tightly interconnected with the brain's learning and memory centers. The brain records not just the sweet taste itself, but all the surrounding circumstances, the time of day, the location, the people, and your current emotions. This is how powerful triggers are formed. For instance, maybe you're used to having coffee with a croissant every morning. Now just the smell of coffee, or the sight of that cafe, will trigger a dopamine release in anticipation of the reward, leading to an intense craving for the croissant. You haven't even had a bite, but your brain is already demanding its reward. This explains why habits linked to sugar are so incredibly hard to break. Visualization idea for the audience. Imagine an animation of the brain showing a fireworks display of dopamine exploding after you eat a piece of candy. With repeated consumption, that fireworks display gets dimmer and dimmer, requiring more and more candy to achieve the original, brilliant explosion. Sleep isn't just downtime. It's when your body performs its deep clean, repairing tissues, and crucially for our topic, resetting and calibrating your entire hormonal system. Chronic sleep deprivation. Even if you're sleeping 6 hours instead of the recommended 8, delivers a crushing blow. To the hormones that control your appetite, let's look at exactly what happens when we don't get enough rest. First, the level of our familiar hunger hormone, ghrelin, sharply increases. Studies show that just one night of poor sleep can raise its level by 15 to 30%. Your body is quite literally screaming for food, even if you've eaten enough. Secondly, at the same time, your satiety hormone, leptin, drops. Your brain stops receiving signals that you are full. The combination of high ghrelin and low leptin is a toxic cocktail that creates an almost uncontrollable hunger. Throughout the entire next day, you'll want to eat more often, and you'll find it much harder to stop. But that's not all. Lack of sleep affects not just how much you want to eat, but also what you crave. A sleep-deprived brain is a brain under stress. Activity drops in the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for thoughtful decision-making, self-control, and willpower. Simultaneously, activity spikes in the amygdala, the brain center for emotion and primitive desires. As a result, your ability to resist temptation plummets. You are magnetically drawn to the worst, highest calorie, fattiest, and sweetest foods. A chicken breast salad seems boring, while pizza, a burger, and a chocolate cake are the ultimate desire. Your brain is looking for quick pleasure and easy energy to compensate for the fatigue. Furthermore, a lack of sleep directly leads to insulin resistance. Even just one night of poor sleep can reduce your cell's sensitivity to insulin as much as 6 months on a high-fat diet. Your body struggles to process carbohydrates, which leads to sugar spikes and an even greater craving for sweets. Therefore, if you are trying to fight sugar cravings but only getting 5 or 6 hours of sleep, you are essentially setting yourself up for failure. Prioritizing sleep is the absolute first and most crucial step. Think of it this way. In a well-rested brain, the self-control center is highly active. In a sleep-deprived brain, that area is dormant, while the primitive desire center is lit up like a Christmas tree. Let's move our focus a little lower, from the brain down to our gut. In recent years, scientists have increasingly realized that the gut is far more than just a digestive tube. It's an incredibly complex ecosystem, our second brain. It's home to trillions of bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms, collectively known as the microbiome. And these tiny residents have a colossal impact on our health, mood, and even our food preferences. The microbiome can be broadly divided into the good guys and the bad guys. The good bacteria, or probiotics, help us digest food, synthesize vitamins, train the immune system, and produce beneficial substances like short-chain fatty acids, which nourish the gut lining and reduce inflammation. The bad, or opportunistic bacteria, on the other hand, can trigger inflammation, produce toxins, and disrupt digestion. There's a constant battle for territory and resources happening between these two camps, and what we eat directly determines who wins this fight. The good bacteria thrive on fiber, the dietary fibers found in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes. The bad bacteria and fungi, such as Candida, absolutely love sugar. For them, sugar is the ultimate fuel for growth and reproduction. When our diet is high in sugar and refined carbohydrates, we are literally feeding an army of these bad microorganisms. They begin to dominate, crowding out the beneficial flora. This state is known as dysbiosis. But here's where it gets really interesting. These bad bacteria aren't just passive eaters. They've learned to manipulate their host, us, to get more of their favorite food. They can produce special proteins that mimic our own hunger and satiety hormones. They can influence our taste receptors, making sweet flavors even more appealing. They can also impact the vagus nerve, which directly connects the gut and the brain, sending signals that we perceive as an uncontrollable craving for sugar. Essentially, it's no longer you wanting that cake. It's trillions of hungry bacteria in your gut demanding their sugar fix, and resisting this pressure from within is incredibly difficult. The perfect visual for this is an animation of the gut, where the good bacteria, the little angels, and the bad bacteria, the little devils, are constantly battling. When a piece of broccoli drops in, the angels get stronger. But when a candy bar falls, the army of devils grows and starts controlling the human puppet. To continue our discussion on the gut microbiome, it's worth taking a closer look at one of its most notorious bad residents, the yeast-like fungus called Candida albicans. Normally, Candida is present in small amounts in the gut, on the skin, and on mucous membranes in most healthy people, and it's harmless. This is because its growth is controlled by beneficial bacteria and the immune system. However, under certain circumstances, for example, after a course of antibiotics that wipe out both good and bad bacteria during chronic stress with a weakened immune system, or, most crucially, on a diet high in sugar, Candida can begin to multiply uncontrollably. This state is known as candidiasis, or Candida overgrowth. Candida is a true sugar fiend. Its primary food source is simple sugars and refined carbohydrates. As it proliferates, it forms entire colonies in the gut that demand a constant supply of their favorite fuel. Like other pathogenic microorganisms, Candida is extremely effective at manipulating us. It releases over 79 different toxins into the bloodstream, including acetaldehyde, the same compound that causes hangovers. These toxins can cause a whole spectrum of unpleasant symptoms: chronic fatigue, brain fog, digestive issues like bloating and gas, skin rashes, and mood swings. But most significantly, Candida directly triggers an intense, obsessive craving for sweets and starches. This is its survival mechanism. It essentially hacks our biochemistry to force us to feed it. A person with candidiasis might experience hunger pangs that don't subside after eating, and the desire for something sweet becomes almost uncontrollable. This isn't just a casual, "I want a piece of cake." It's a physiological need dictated by the fungus. Moreover, Candida's byproducts can disrupt serotonin production in the gut, leading to low mood and depressive states, which we, in turn, often try to self-medicate with sugar. This creates a cruel, vicious cycle. Sugar feeds Candida, Candida causes sugar cravings and a bad mood, and we treat the bad mood with more sugar. The only way to break this cycle is by starving the Candida, that is, eliminating sugar and simple carbohydrates from the diet, while simultaneously repopulating the gut with beneficial bacteria. Visually, you can imagine one tiny Candida cell eating a piece of sugar and rapidly dividing, transforming into a huge, menacing colony that has ensnared the gut with its tentacles. For many women, sugar cravings aren't a constant battle. They're cyclical, intensely ramping up during specific days of the month. And the name for this phenomenon is premenstrual syndrome, or PMS, that intense urge to devour an entire chocolate bar, a whole box of sweets, or a tub of ice cream in the days leading up to your period, is a feeling many can relate to. This is absolutely not just an imagination or a whim. It's the direct result of complex hormonal shifts happening inside the female body. In the second half of the menstrual cycle, right after ovulation, there is a sharp drop in the levels of both estrogen and progesterone. These hormonal fluctuations directly impact brain chemistry. Specifically, they lead to a decrease in the levels of the happiness hormone, serotonin, and the pleasure hormone, dopamine. The brain, deprived of its usual dose of these key neurotransmitters, begins to experience a deficit of positive emotions. We become more irritable, tearful, and anxious, and the brain instinctively seeks the fastest way to remedy the situation. As we know, sugary and carbohydrate-rich foods are an express lane method for temporarily boosting those serotonin and dopamine levels. A chocolate bar during this time isn't just food. It often feels like medicine, a form of self-medication, and a quick fix to lift a dropping mood. Furthermore, cortisol, the stress hormone, also tends to rise during this phase, which further amplifies the desire for comfort foods. The body is essentially trying to use sugar and fat to counteract the stress caused by the hormonal changes. Another key factor is blood sugar instability. The shifts in estrogen and progesterone levels can temporarily cause mild insulin resistance, making it harder for cells to absorb glucose efficiently. This results in sharper peaks and crashes in blood sugar, triggering intense hunger pangs and those cravings for quick carbohydrates. And, as we've often discussed, many women also experience a magnesium deficiency during this phase, as the mineral is rapidly depleted amidst the hormonal restructuring. The intense craving for chocolate is a classic indicator of low magnesium. Given that cocoa beans are incredibly rich in this mineral, your body is literally trying to tell you what it needs. So, if you notice this cyclical urge, the first step is to stop blaming yourself. It's important to understand the root cause and try to support your body in alternative ways. Increase your intake of foods rich in magnesium and tryptophan, which is a precursor to serotonin. Include more complex carbohydrates to stabilize blood sugar, and find healthy ways to manage stress. The thyroid is a small, butterfly-shaped organ located at the base of your neck. But despite its humble size, it acts as the master conductor of our metabolism. The hormones it produces essentially control the speed at which your body burns calories and produces energy. When the thyroid is functioning normally, our metabolism is perfectly balanced. However, if its function declines, a condition known as hypothyroidism, our entire metabolism dramatically slows down. Imagine someone turned the speed dial of your internal engine right down to the minimum setting. Every process in the body starts running slower. Key symptoms of hypothyroidism include constant, chronic fatigue, weakness, apathy, and profound sleepiness. The person literally lacks the energy for everything. They struggle to wake up in the morning, find it hard to concentrate at work, and have zero motivation for physical activity. So what does your body do when it's critically starved of energy? It starts demanding the fastest, simplest fuel source it knows: sugars and simple carbohydrates. This craving for sweets and carbs in hypothyroidism isn't a psychological failing. It's your body's desperate attempt to kickstart its slowed-down metabolism and get some immediate burst of energy. Someone with undiagnosed hypothyroidism may constantly battle weight gain because calories are burned so slowly, while simultaneously having an overwhelming desire for the very foods that trigger that weight gain. It is a truly frustrating and vicious cycle. Beyond fatigue and sweet cravings, other symptoms can point to hypothyroidism: hair loss, dry skin, brittle nails, always feeling cold, intolerance to cold, swelling or puffiness, constipation, and a low or depressed mood. Hypothyroidism is an extremely common issue, particularly among women, and it often goes undiagnosed for years. Therefore, if you recognize yourself in this description, it's a strong sign to consult an endocrinologist and get your thyroid function checked. Trying to fight sugar cravings without correcting the underlying hormonal imbalance will feel like tilting at windmills. The visual analogy here is a turtle labeled metabolism, barely crawling forward, while a person stands next to it, frantically offering it candy to make it go faster. The adrenal glands are a pair of glands situated, as the name suggests, on top of the kidneys. Their primary role is to help us manage stress by producing hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline. In today's world, which is saturated with chronic stress, our adrenal glands are working virtually non-stop. Constant work deadlines, financial worries, lack of sleep, and information overload all keep the adrenals in a perpetual state of fight-or-flight mode. Over time, if the stress continues unabated and the body doesn't get sufficient rest to recover, the adrenals can become fatigued. Their ability to adequately respond to stress and produce the right amount of hormones declines. This condition is commonly known as adrenal fatigue. Although this term is not always recognized by conventional medicine, the symptoms it describes are familiar to a great number of people. In the early stages, while the body is still fighting, cortisol levels may remain consistently high. As we know, this leads to elevated blood sugar, insulin resistance, and intense cravings for both sweet and salty foods. However, in the later stages of exhaustion, the adrenals can no longer keep up and produce sufficient cortisol. Its level, especially in the morning, becomes critically low. This results in a deep, all-consuming fatigue that even extended sleep cannot fix. A person feels utterly drained, and getting out of bed is a major struggle. In this depleted state, the body instinctively seeks external stimulants to somehow get a boost of energy. The most accessible stimulants are caffeine and sugar. A cup of coffee with something sweet becomes a vital necessity just to kick-start the day. Throughout the day, people may experience sudden bouts of weakness and dizziness related to a drop in blood sugar, hypoglycemia, which once again forces an urgent need to consume something sweet. The individual becomes dependent on these quick energy fixes. While they provide a temporary spike in alertness, in the long term, they further deplete the already overworked adrenals. It's like spurring a horse that is already exhausted. It might run a little further, but then it will collapse from fatigue. Restoring adrenal function is a lengthy process that requires, first and foremost, stress management, normalized sleep, and a balanced diet that eliminates sugary crutches. Visually, you might think of the adrenal glands as a battery, initially 100% charged, then 50%, then down to 1%, and the person is trying to jump-start it with a chocolate bar. Now, let's shift our focus from the realm of physiology to the sphere of psychology and behavior. Very often, our intense sugar cravings aren't rooted in any biochemical imbalance, but are simply a learned habit that has become completely automatic. Our brain absolutely loves rituals and habits because they are huge energy savers. It doesn't have to make a decision every time. It simply follows an established pattern, and consuming sugar integrates itself very easily into these daily rituals. Think about your typical day. Perhaps you have a habit of starting your morning with a sweet coffee and a croissant, or maybe you always eat dessert right after lunch. Or could your evening ritual be watching a series with a packet of cookies or tea and candies? These actions are repeated day after day, year after year. The brain forms a strong neural pathway between a specific action, like morning coffee, lunch, or an evening show, and the subsequent sugar consumption. Over time, this connection becomes so robust that one action automatically triggers the desire to perform the other. The mere smell of coffee in the morning can already cause you to salivate and think about a croissant. You don't even stop to consider if you actually want it. It's simply a habit, a reflex, like Pavlov's dog. You're doing it on autopilot. Such rituals are often linked not only to a specific time or action, but also to certain places or people. For instance, you always buy sweet popcorn at the cinema, or you always eat cake when you visit your grandmother. These external triggers, the cinema, grandma's house, activate a conditioned response and the desire for something sweet, even if you aren't hungry. Combating these habits can be extremely difficult because they are deeply embedded in our subconscious. Simply telling yourself, "I won't eat sweets tonight," often doesn't work. This is where a mindful or conscious approach is needed. First, you need to track and identify your rituals. When does the craving arise? What precedes it? Then, you need to try to replace the old habit with a new, healthier one. For example, instead of cookies with your evening tea, grab a few berries or a handful of nuts. Or, after lunch, go for a short walk instead of having dessert. Initially, this will require effort and self-control, but with time, the brain will form a new neural pathway, and the healthy habit will become automatic as well. Visually, you could show the scheme. Cue, that trigger, evening series, routine, action, going to the kitchen for cookies. Reward, pleasure from the sugar. And next to it, the new scheme, where the action is replaced with brewing a cup of herbal tea. One of the most powerful psychological drivers behind sugar cravings is emotional eating. This is when we use food, especially sweet food, not to satisfy physical hunger, but to cope with our emotions. Sweets become our comfort, our friend, a reward, and a distraction from unpleasant feelings. Let's look at how this works with different emotions. Sadness, loneliness, and hurt. When we feel down, we look for solace. Sweet, fatty, comfort food biochemically stimulates the production of serotonin and endorphins, causing a short-lived sense of relief and well-being. It's like a warm blanket for our soul. The classic example is ice cream after a breakup. Anxiety and stress. As we know, stress increases cortisol levels, which pushes us toward high-calorie foods. The act of chewing itself can be calming, almost meditative, and the sweet taste distracts us from anxious thoughts, shifting our focus to pleasant sensations. Joy and celebration. Since childhood, sweets have been associated with celebration, birthday cake, holiday treats. We've become accustomed to rewarding ourselves and marking happy occasions with dessert. Passed an exam, have a pastry, got a promotion, order a cake. Sweets become synonymous with reward and success. Boredom. When we have nothing to do, food becomes a simple, easily accessible form of entertainment. A trip to the fridge is a way to break the monotony, get a new sensation, and occupy our hands and mouths. A sweet snack provides a small dopamine spike and helps to brighten dull moments. The difference between emotional and physical hunger. So how can you tell the difference? Physical hunger builds gradually. It can wait, and after you eat, you feel satisfied. Emotional hunger, however, hits suddenly, demands immediate gratification, and you crave something specific, like that chocolate bar, not a bowl of soup. Most importantly, after you've eaten your feelings, you're often left with guilt and shame, which only worsens the original problem. The key to overcoming emotional eating is developing mindfulness. You need to learn to recognize your true emotions and find adequate, non-food-related ways to process them. If you're sad, call a friend or watch an uplifting movie. If you're stressed, take a bath or go for a walk. If you're bored, find a hobby. Food doesn't solve emotional problems. It only masks them temporarily. Visual cue summary. Remember the image. A person with a small rain cloud of sadness over their head. They eat the cake. The cloud disappears for a moment, but then it returns, bigger and darker, with a bolt of lightning, the feeling of guilt. A lot of our eating habits and the relationship we have with food are established in early childhood. The core beliefs and patterns we pick up from our parents and grandparents can unconsciously govern our behavior for the rest of our lives. One of the most common and damaging of these patterns is using sweets as a parenting tool, either as a reward for good behavior or as comfort during disappointment. Think of phrases like these. If you're a good boy, you'll get a treat. Eat your soup, then you can have dessert. Don't cry. Here, eat this chocolate. It'll be okay. What happens in a child's mind at that moment? They internalize several very strong models. First, the connection good behavior equals sweets is established. Sweets become the primary reward, the measure of success. The child learns to do things not because they are right or interesting, but simply to get that coveted treat. This model is then carried into adulthood. We start rewarding ourselves with sweets for any achievement. We think, I worked so hard all week, I deserve this cake. Second, food is split into bad but necessary, like soup or vegetables, and good and desirable, which is dessert. Dessert becomes the goal, the main event of the meal. Healthy food is seen as an annoying obstacle on the path to pleasure. This completely distorts a healthy relationship with food and creates what's known as dessert mentality. Third, and this is arguably the most dangerous, the child learns to eat away their negative emotions. They feel sad, they fall down, or they're hurt. And instead of learning to process those feelings, talk about them, or receive support, they get sugar. Sweets become a universal painkiller for emotional wounds. The child doesn't learn to cope with difficulties. They learn to ignore them using food. In adulthood, this pattern leads to the emotional eating we've discussed. Any stress, any setback, and the hand automatically reaches for that childhood comfort food. It's very difficult to get rid of these deeply ingrained patterns because they feel like a part of who we are. The first step is simply to become aware of them. Analyze your childhood, recall how sweets were handled in your family, and understand that this is merely a learned program, one that absolutely can and should be rewritten. Start praising and rewarding yourself, not with food, but with other enjoyable things. A trip to the spa, buying a new book, or meeting up with friends. Imagine a visual metaphor, a cartoon where a mother gives a crying child a candy, and above the child's head, a neural pathway forms, represented by a light bulb that says, sadness equals candy. Another common psychological reason we find ourselves reaching for something sweet is simple: boredom and procrastination. How often have you been sitting at work or at home, faced with a difficult task you're dreading, and thought, maybe I should just go make a cup of tea and grab a cookie? That trip to the kitchen is nothing more than a way to put off an unpleasant task and get a quick, small hit of pleasure. The brain is inherently lazy. It actively dislikes straining itself and spending energy on complex cognitive tasks. When faced with something difficult or boring, like writing a report, studying for an exam, or cleaning the house, it starts searching for any possible way to avoid the work. And food, especially sweet treats, is the perfect candidate for that distracting maneuver. First, it's a legal and socially acceptable break. We tell ourselves, I'm not procrastinating, I'm just taking a legitimate snack break. Second, it's a guaranteed source of pleasure. Eating that piece of candy triggers a dopamine release, which gives us a feeling of satisfaction and reward that the boring task simply can't provide. Your brain basically whispers, "See, you don't have to finish that tedious report to feel good. You can just eat this chocolate bar instead." Third, the process itself. Getting up, walking to the kitchen, brewing the tea, selecting the cookie, is a ritual. This ritual helps us kill time and effectively postpones the moment we have to return to the difficult task. Boredom works in a similar fashion. When our brain isn't receiving enough external stimulation, it starts actively searching for it. And food is the easiest, most accessible way to get new sensory input. The taste, the smell, the texture. Boredom snacking is an attempt to alleviate that mental fog and apathy. The problem, of course, is that this strategy for dealing with boredom and procrastination does nothing to solve the underlying issue. The report still isn't written, and the house still isn't clean. Instead, all we've done is add a layer of guilt over what we ate, along with the negative health consequences that come from excess sugar. To break this destructive cycle, we need to learn how to manage procrastination using different methods. For example, you can use the Pomodoro technique. Work for 25 minutes, then take a 5-minute break, not for food, but for stretching or deep breathing exercises. And you can combat boredom by finding interesting activities and hobbies that truly stimulate your brain, rather than relying on a sugar high. To visualize this, imagine an office worker sitting in front of a mountain of papers. Above their head is a dark cloud labeled "Boring Report." They push the papers aside, grab a cookie, and for a fleeting moment, the cloud is replaced by a rainbow. Then, the rainbow vanishes, the dark cloud returns, and the mountain of papers looks even higher. We are social beings, and our eating behavior is deeply intertwined with our surroundings, traditions, and cultural norms. Sometimes we consume sweets not because we genuinely crave them, but because it's the done thing, or simply because we want to avoid offending someone. This is the essence of social pressure. Let's look at some typical scenarios. Holidays and family gatherings. Can you imagine a birthday without cake, or a big holiday celebration without all the traditional treats? It's practically impossible. Dessert is often an integral part of celebrating in our culture. Refusing a slice of your friend's birthday cake, or a piece of your grandma's famous pie at a family dinner, can actually be interpreted as disrespect, or even an insult. Phrases like, "Do you not respect me?" or "I worked so hard and baked this just for you, and you won't even try it," are powerful manipulation tactics that are incredibly difficult to resist. We end up eating to avoid causing offense, to fit in, and to simply maintain the celebratory atmosphere. Visiting friends. When you visit someone's home, they will almost certainly offer you tea or coffee with a something sweet. It feels awkward to refuse. Your hosts might think you don't like their home, or that you find their hospitality lacking. So, you eat that cookie or candy purely out of politeness. Office gatherings. At the office, someone is always bringing in cake for a birthday, chocolates after a vacation, or just cookies for the coffee break. This is a form of social bonding and team building. Refusing to participate in this ritual can, in a way, separate you from the group. You might not even want the sweets, but you join the kitchen huddle to socialize and avoid being the odd one out. meeting up with friends. Going to a coffee shop often means ordering not just a latte, but also a pastry or dessert. It's part of the experience. If your friend orders a cheesecake, it can be incredibly difficult to hold back and not order something for yourself, even if you're not hungry. That herd mentality kicks in, driven by the desire not to stand out. Standing up to social pressure is not easy. It requires self-confidence and the ability to politely yet firmly assert your boundaries. It is crucial to learn how to say, "No, thank you," without feeling guilty. You can use simple phrases like, "Thank you, it looks delicious, but I'm just not hungry right now," or "I'd love a cup of tea, but I'll pass on the dessert." Over time, the people around you will get used to your choices and stop pressuring you. A clear illustration of this is a scene at a party where everyone is enjoying cake, but one person politely declines. At first they might get surprised looks, but soon the celebration continues, and everything is perfectly fine. We live in a world of constant advertising bombardment. The food industry spends billions of dollars trying to make us crave and purchase their products, especially the ones loaded with sugar, salt, and fat. Marketers are brilliant psychologists who know exactly how to exploit our deepest vulnerabilities. Let's break down their most common manipulation tactics. The power of association. Advertising never sells you just a candy bar. They're selling happiness, joy, family togetherness, romance, or a moment of pure bliss. Think of the ads. A happy family having sugary cereal for breakfast, a couple sharing a chocolate bar, or friends laughing over a sweet soda. Our brains create a strong link. This product equals positive emotion. When we're lacking those emotions in real life, we don't buy the food, we buy the advertised feeling. Vibrant packaging. Package design is meticulously crafted using color and shape psychology. Bright, punchy colors, like red, yellow, and orange, grab our attention and stimulate our appetite. Smiling characters, especially on kids' items, build trust and positive association. Even the names, wonder, tender, bliss, promise us not just a meal, but an emotional experience. Strategic store placement. The most harmful impulse buys are always placed in the golden zone, the checkout aisle. While you're standing in line, tired after shopping, your eyes are drawn to these bright packages. Your self-control drops, and your hand automatically reaches for that small treat. Products marketed to children are deliberately put on lower shelves, right at their eye level, so they can easily grab the item and start lobbying their parents for it. Hidden advertising, product placement. Your favorite movie star drinks a specific soda or eats a certain cookie. A popular influencer casually recommends their go-to energy drink. We don't see this as a direct ad. We see it as part of a character's life or a trusted person's recommendation. This builds brand loyalty and an urge to imitate. The health-washing lie. Marketers manipulate the concepts of healthy and natural. They plaster words like fitness, whole grain, with vitamins, natural, or farm fresh on products that, in reality, contain massive amounts of sugar. That so-called fitness bar might have just as much sugar as a regular candy bar, and natural fruit juice is essentially just sugar water with zero fiber. We end up buying the illusion of health, essentially deceiving ourselves. Recognizing these tricks is the first crucial step to resisting them. We have to learn to ignore the flashy claims on the front of the package and read the fine print ingredients on the back. Remember, advertising isn't selling you food, it's selling you a fantasy. Hidden sugar is one of the most insidious traps, even for people who try their best to eat healthy. We might consciously avoid cakes, candy, and soda, yet still consume a massive amount of sugar from foods we consider to be healthy or harmless. Food manufacturers have become masters at masking sugar, adding it to nearly all processed products to enhance flavor, improve texture, and extend shelf life. Let's conduct an audit of a typical refrigerator and expose these hidden enemies. Healthy breakfasts. Think muesli, granola, instant oatmeal, and fitness cereals. Sounds great, right? But check the label. In most of them, sugar, or its synonyms like glucose syrup, fructose, or molasses, is the second or third ingredient after the grains. A single serving of this healthy meal can often contain your entire recommended daily intake of sugar. Dairy products. Fat-free fruit yogurt is a classic example of a pseudo-healthy food. To compensate for the lack of flavor after removing the fat, manufacturers generously load it with sugar. A small container of this yogurt might contain 3 to 4 teaspoons of sugar. The same applies to cottage cheese desserts, processed cheese snacks, and milkshakes. Sauces and dressings. Ketchup, barbecue sauce, sweet and sour sauce, and pre-made salad dressings are absolute sugar bombs. We pour them over perfectly healthy food like meat and vegetables, completely unaware that we are consuming several spoonfuls of pure sugar. Even mustard and mayonnaise often contain added sugar. Bread and baked goods. Sugar is added to most types of commercially produced bread, even savory loaves, to help with the fermentation process and give the crust a nice brown color. Canned goods. Canned corn, peas, beans, and pickled vegetables like cucumbers and tomatoes often have sugar added as a preservative and flavor enhancer. Beverages. Sweetened sodas are the obvious enemy, but what about boxed juices, even those that are labeled as 100% juice? They're essentially water with massive amounts of fruit sugar, or fructose, but without the beneficial fiber that slows down its absorption. Bottled iced tea, fruit drinks, and sweetened waters, they are all major sources of liquid sugar. Processed and ready-made meals. From frozen pizza to canned soups and packaged meat products, sugar can be found in the most unexpected places. It acts as a universal flavor enhancer. The only way to avoid this trap is to develop one crucial habit. Always read the nutrition labels. Learn the many names manufacturers use for sugar: sucrose, fructose, glucose, dextrose, maltose, molasses, invert syrup, and corn syrup. If one of these ingredients is near the beginning of the list, it means the product contains a high amount of it. Trying to cut back on calories and sugar, many people turn to products with artificial sweeteners, diet sodas, sugar-free treats, and tabletop sugar substitutes. It seems like the perfect solution, a sweet taste without the calories. However, the reality is much more complicated. Paradoxically, in the long term, artificial sweeteners can trick our bodies and may even increase our sugar cravings. How does this happen? Our tongue registers a sweet taste, whether it comes from actual sugar or a substitute. A signal is sent to the brain. Heads up, energy, glucose, is on the way. In response to this alert, The brain prepares. The pancreas may even release a small shot of insulin, expecting sugar. But the sugar never arrives. There is no energy. The brain is confused. It was promised a reward, but the reward was never delivered. This deception can lead to several negative consequences. First, the connection between sweet taste equals calories is disrupted. The body stops trusting its own taste receptors. The next time you eat something naturally sweet, like a piece of fruit, the brain might inaccurately gauge its caloric value and fail to send satiety signals in time. This can lead to overeating. Second, the unfulfilled expectation of a reward can actually intensify cravings. A brain that has been cheated will demand the real, honest sweetness, actual sugar, to finally get its dopamine hit and energy boost. As a result, after drinking a diet soda, you may soon find yourself with an undeniable urge to eat a real dessert. Third, some studies suggest that artificial sweeteners can negatively affect the gut microbiome. They can disrupt the balance of bacteria, promoting the growth of species linked to obesity and metabolic disorders. And as we know, our microbiome directly influences our food preferences. Essentially, by trying to trick our sweet tooth, we might be feeding bacteria in our gut that demand even more sugar. Of course, sugar substitutes vary. Some, like stevia or erythritol, are generally considered safer options. However, even with these, it's important not to overdo it. The best strategy is not to replace sugar with an imitation, but to gradually wean your taste receptors off the intensely sweet flavor. Over time, regular foods, fruits, and vegetables will naturally start to taste surprisingly sweet and delicious without any added substitutes. In the quest for a slimmer physique, many people turn to extreme low-carb or no-carb diets. They completely eliminate not just sweets and refined flour, but also whole grains, and even some fruits and vegetables. While this might deliver quick results on the scale in the short term, the long-term reality almost always involves a crash, leading to uncontrollable cravings for the exact foods they tried to ban. Why does this happen? It's crucial to understand that not all carbohydrates are created equal. First, you have simple or fast-releasing carbohydrates, things like refined sugar, white flour, and sweets. They provide a rapid but fleeting burst of energy, which triggers a sharp insulin spike. Then there are complex or slow-releasing carbohydrates. These include whole grains like buckwheat, brown rice, and oatmeal, as well as legumes, vegetables, and whole grain breads. They are made up of long molecular chains, which the body breaks down slowly, gradually releasing glucose into the bloodstream. Complex carbohydrates are our body's primary and cleanest fuel source. They are essential for the proper functioning of the brain, muscles, and every system in the body. Crucially, they are also a key source of dietary fiber, which feeds our healthy gut microbiome and promotes long-lasting satiety. When we completely strip all carbohydrates, including the complex ones, from our diet, we are essentially starving our body of its primary fuel. Yes, the body can switch to using fat for fuel, a process called ketosis, but for many this transition is highly stressful. The brain, which prefers to run on glucose, begins to experience an energy deficit, often leading to mental fog and fatigue. Furthermore, the complete exclusion of carbohydrates can inhibit serotonin production, the happy hormone, because insulin is required for its synthesis. The result is often poor mood, apathy, irritability, and a constant obsession with food. The body is in a state of chronic stress and depletion, and sooner or later a tipping point is reached when willpower simply runs out. A major binge occurs. And of course, we don't break the diet with broccoli or a bowl of oatmeal. We reach for the fastest, most concentrated source of energy and pleasure: cakes, pastries, and chocolate. This crash is followed by intense guilt. The person either gives up on the diet entirely or tries to restart it with even greater restriction, which inevitably sets the stage for a new, even worse binge. The correct strategy isn't to eliminate carbohydrates completely, but to swap simple ones for complex ones. Focus on including a portion of whole grains or vegetables with every meal. This ensures stable energy levels, supports a better mood, and prevents binges, making the weight loss process both comfortable and sustainable. Think of it like a spring. The dieter forcibly compresses the spring by sticking to a restrictive diet. But at a certain point, the pressure becomes too much. The fingers slip, and the spring violently recoils, rocketing them straight toward the cake. Those nagging sugar cravings might not just be a psychological thing. They can also be a strong signal of deep physical exhaustion. This often happens when you push yourself too hard, combining excessive physical training with insufficient recovery, a classic case of overtraining. Looking to shed weight, many people fall into the trap of daily grueling multi-hour workouts. They operate on the belief that the more they sweat, the faster the results will come. The truth is, your body simply doesn't work that way. Physical training is fundamentally a stressor on your body. In response, muscle fibers break down, your glycogen stores are depleted, and your nervous system takes a hit. Remember this: muscle growth and physical improvements happen not during the workout itself, but while you are resting and recovering afterward. When you provide the right amount of stress and adequate recovery time, which includes proper sleep and nutrition, your body adapts, getting stronger and more resilient. But if you train too frequently, too intensely, and neglect rest, your system fails to keep up. This leads directly to the state of overtraining. The telltale symptoms of overtraining are chronic fatigue, muscle soreness that just won't go away, declining strength and performance, irritability, sleep problems, and frequent sickness due to a weakened immune system. And of course, a massive, unshakable sugar craving. Why does this happen? First, intense workouts completely drain your body's glycogen reserves, your primary energy stores in the muscles and liver. The body needs to refill these stores urgently. It sends a strong signal to the brain demanding fast-acting carbohydrates. This is a normal physiological process, but in a state of overtraining, this demand becomes chronic and overpowering. Second, overtraining is a state of chronic stress, which means chronically high cortisol levels, and we know the strong connection between high cortisol and craving comfort foods. Your body tries to eat away the physical stress, much like we try to comfort eat our emotional stress. Third, it's simply a desperate plea for energy. When your body is totally depleted and your nervous system is pushed to its limit, sugar feels like the only quick fix, a fast boost that promises to get you through the rest of the day. So, if you're hitting the gym hard and those sweet cravings just won't quit, it might be time to rethink your training schedule. Are you overtraining? Are you skimping on sleep and recovery? Remember, rest is not a reward. It is an absolutely vital part of the training process. Imagine a runner on a treadmill pushing past the point of exhaustion. As they collapse, the only thing they can see is the saving, irresistible image of a donut. To wrap up our investigation, let's ask a crucial question. Is our sweet tooth hardwired into our DNA? Does that legendary sweet tooth gene actually exist? The one we could use to justify our love for desserts? Science tells us it's a bit more complicated than that, but a certain genetic predisposition does, in fact, exist. Scientists have uncovered several genes that can influence how we perceive sweet flavors and how our body metabolizes sugar. For instance, there are variations in the genes responsible for our taste receptors. Some individuals naturally have more sweet taste receptors, or they are simply more sensitive. These people might find moderately sweet food quite satisfying, whereas those with less sensitive receptors would need significantly more sugar to achieve the same level of enjoyment. We also have genes that affect the production and sensitivity of receptors for dopamine, our pleasure neurotransmitter. Individuals with certain variations of these genes may get a much stronger dopamine response from sweets, making them more susceptible to forming a sugar dependency. Other genes can influence how our body produces and uses hunger and satiety hormones, such as ghrelin and leptin, or how sensitive we are to insulin. All these genetic characteristics can create a certain predisposition, a baseline, that makes it inherently harder for some people to control their sweet intake than others. However, it's crucial to understand this. Genes are not destiny. They may load the gun, but our lifestyle pulls the trigger. Genetics can determine your predisposition, but not your fate. Even if you have the sweet tooth gene, it doesn't mean you're doomed to an uncontrollable sugar craving. Epigenetics, the science that studies how our lifestyle, diet, stress, and other environmental factors can turn on and turn off our genes, shows that we have a massive influence over our own biology. A balanced, nutrient-rich diet, regular physical activity, quality sleep, and effective stress management. All these factors can neutralize genetic risks and help you take control of your sweet cravings. Think of your genetics as the initial hand of cards you were dealt. But how you play the game is entirely up to you, so don't blame everything on heredity. Instead, focus on the factors that are completely within your control. Imagine the visual of a DNA double helix with certain genes lit up for sweet predisposition, but shown alongside are lifestyle switches that can effectively deactivate those very genes. So, we've covered a tremendous amount of ground together, from the micronutrients in our cells all the way up to global marketing strategies. And what is the main takeaway? That constant craving for sweets is almost never just a lack of willpower. It's a complex, multifaceted signal being sent by your body and your mind. It might be a cry for help due to a chromium or magnesium deficiency. It could be a symptom of a hormonal imbalance, such as insulin resistance or hypothyroidism. It may be the result of chronic stress, lack of sleep, or even an overgrowth of bacteria in your gut. Or perhaps it's a deeply rooted childhood habit, or a way to cope with sadness and boredom. The most surprising thing is that all of these factors often intertwine, creating a true vicious cycle that feels impossible to break. But now that you know your enemy, now that you understand these underlying mechanisms, you hold the map. You can stop blaming yourself and start taking conscious action. You can start listening to and truly hearing your body. Perhaps instead of another piece of candy, it needs a full, protein and vegetable-packed meal. Maybe instead of a pastry, it needs an extra hour of sleep or a walk in the fresh air. Or maybe it simply needs a glass of water. Understanding is the first and most crucial step toward freedom from sugar dependence. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you learned something new and helpful, please hit the like button. It seriously helps the channel's growth. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dives into the world of health and nutrition. And now for my question to you. Of the 30 reasons for sugar cravings we discussed, which one was the most unexpected for you? Or which one resonated the most? Let me know in the comments. I'm really interested in reading your stories and opinions. Let's discuss it.